I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman with a secret like this. I was married for 12 years to a man who slowly became a stranger in our home. George used to be loving, attentive, and present, but over time, stress, career changes, maybe just life, he grew emotionally absent. Our conversations became transactional. Our touches were rare and robotic. I often felt like a ghost in my own marriage. Enter Adam, George's son from his first marriage. He was 24, independent, respectful, and visited every couple of weekends. I never saw him as anything other than my stepson, not at first, but there was something about the way he listened, the way he saw me. He noticed when I got a haircut, when I looked tired, when I needed help carrying groceries. His presence reminded me of the emotional attention I had longed for. One night, after a particularly brutal argument with George that ended with him leaving the house in silence, I drank too much wine. Adam had just arrived from a weekend trip and offered to take me for a drive to clear my head. I shouldn't have gone. I knew I wasn't sober, and neither was he, but I needed to breathe, I needed to talk. We drove out to a quiet overlook on the edge of town. It was late. We sat in the car, windows down, stars above us, and talked for hours, about George, about loneliness. About how hard it is to want to be seen and touched and heard, and to be denied all of that in the one place you're supposed to have it. Adam's hand brushed mine. I pulled away at first. He apologized. But something inside me cracked. I had spent years starving for connection, and here it was, in the most forbidden and complicated form imaginable. We crossed a line that night. We didn't speak on the drive home. The silence screamed louder than words ever could. The guilt is unbearable. I live with it every day. But so is the truth of what led me there, years of feeling unloved, unwanted, unnoticed. What happened between us was wrong. But it was also real. It came from a place of emotional starvation that had been growing in the shadows for far too long. It's been 6 months. George still doesn't know. Adam moved to another city. We don't speak. But the memory of that night, the shame, the release, the betrayal, it lingers. Love can decay in silence, and when it does, the consequences can take forms you'd never imagine yourself capable of. It didn't happen overnight. That's the most painful part. It was slow, almost invisible. A gradual drifting apart that didn't feel dangerous until I was already drowning. George and I had what most people would call a stable marriage. Bills were paid on time, dinners were eaten in the same room, weekends spent running errands together. But somewhere between the routines and the responsibilities, we stopped seeing each other. He wasn't unkind, but he was absent in a way that left me aching in places I didn't even know could ache. I remember our early years together. There was passion, laughter, inside jokes that made sense only to us. But over the past few years, that intimacy faded. Conversations became functional. How was work? Did you take the dog out? Can you pick up milk? I couldn't tell you the last time he touched me like a woman, not just as someone who shared the bed. Physical affection had become something occasional, mechanical, if it happened at all. Worse than the physical distance was the emotional one. I would try to talk to him. I'd say, "George, I feel like you don't even notice me anymore." And he would sigh, rub his temples, and respond with, "I'm tired, okay. Can we not do this right now?" That right now stretched into weeks, months. Eventually, I stopped asking for more. I started to shrink inside myself, convincing myself it wasn't that bad. I told myself, this is just marriage. It's not supposed to feel like the beginning forever. But what do you do when the emotional void becomes so loud it echoes in every part of your day? When you spend more time thinking about being noticed than actually being noticed? There were nights I would stand in front of the mirror, wondering if I'd become invisible, not just to him, but maybe to the world. I'd put on a nice dress, do my hair, and walk downstairs to find him already glued to his laptop or halfway through a game on TV. I would sit across from him at the dinner table and feel more alone than when I ate by myself. That kind of loneliness doesn't just hurt, it changes you. You start to crave the smallest signs of affection from anyone. A smile from a stranger at the grocery store. A compliment from a coworker. The sound of someone saying your name with interest. It becomes less about wanting attention and more about needing confirmation that you're still someone worth being seen. And that's when Adam started to feel different to me. He was George's son from his first marriage, and I'd always treated him like family. But over time, his visits became something I unconsciously looked forward to. Not for anything inappropriate, at first, just the simplicity of being around someone who noticed things. He'd say, "New earrings, they look nice," or "You look tired, are you okay?" Things George hadn't said to me in years. There was no initial intent. I wasn't looking for something to happen, but I can't pretend I didn't feel the warmth of those words in places that had gone cold for too long. Adam's presence started to soften the edges of my loneliness. He laughed at my jokes, he listened when I talked, and more than anything, he saw me, not as a wife or a stepmother, but as a woman who was still alive under all the weight of years. That scared me. I tried to ignore it. I would catch myself getting dressed with more care before his visits, then feel ashamed. I would feel a flicker of guilt when I looked at him too long, especially when he looked back. But that guilt was tangled with a sense of relief, a feeling that maybe I wasn't crazy to want more. That maybe I wasn't asking for too much. George didn't notice the shift in me, or maybe he did and didn't care to ask. There were nights when Adam was visiting and we'd all be in the same room and George wouldn't even acknowledge that I had spoken. But Adam would laugh or nod or glance over, and I'd feel that tiny flicker of recognition I hadn't felt in years. It's a dangerous thing, emotional deprivation. It makes you hungry in a way that doesn't show on your body, but eats you from the inside. And when someone, anyone, offers even a taste of what you've been starving for, it's almost impossible not to reach for it, even when you know it's wrong, even when it's someone you should never look at that way. It had been a long day, one of those days where everything builds up. The silence at breakfast, the coldness in George's eyes when I tried to ask if he'd be home for dinner, the way he muttered something and walked past me without even making eye contact. By evening, the house felt like a cage. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a glass of wine that quickly became 2, then 3. The weight of feeling unwanted pressed hard against my chest. I don't even know what I was waiting for, may be for him to come back and say he noticed I was slipping. He didn't. Adam arrived just after 10 p.m. He had driven in from the city to spend the weekend. I hadn't known he was coming until I heard the knock. I opened the door and he was there, smiling in that casual, boyish way that always carried some warmth with it. He noticed immediately that something was off. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. I remember nodding too quickly and brushing it off. "Just a long week," I said, waving the wine glass as if it were a joke. He came inside, dropped his bag, and we sat in the living room, catching up. I poured him a drink. We talked about everything but the thing that was gnawing at me, this unbearable loneliness I couldn't seem to shake. He asked about George. I shrugged. I said something like, "You know how he is." But I think Adam knew it was more than that. The way he looked at me, there was a softness, like he already understood. At some point I got up too fast, a little tipsy. He reached to steady me, his hand brushing my arm. It wasn't deliberate, but I froze because that small contact felt more intimate than anything I'd shared with George in months. I sat back down quickly, embarrassed, and we both pretended nothing happened. But something had changed. The air between us grew heavier. We were quiet for a while. Then Adam asked if I wanted to go for a drive, clear my head. I knew I shouldn't have. I knew I was past the point of safe. But the idea of sitting in that house another second, surrounded by the ghosts of what my marriage used to be, I couldn't do it. The roads were empty, the night quiet except for the soft hum of the engine. We ended up at a lookout spot just outside of town, somewhere peaceful. The stars were bright, and the wind carried that kind of stillness that makes you say things you probably shouldn't. I started talking, really talking. About George, about how I felt like I was disappearing inside a life that once felt safe. About how it hurts to be invisible in your own home. Adam didn't interrupt. He just listened, really listened. I started crying without meaning to. He reached over, gently touched my hand. I didn't move away. I didn't want to. He said something then, quiet but clear. "You don't deserve to feel like that." It was the first time in a long time that someone said I deserved something more. And it shattered me. We sat there in silence after that, hands still touching. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was me, maybe it was him, but we leaned in. The kiss was soft, unsure, slow. Not the kind born out of lust, but out of desperation. A cry for warmth, for validation, for escape. The moment after was filled with silence. Neither of us spoke. The weight of what we had done began to settle in, but neither of us reached for the break in time. The line had already been crossed, and we both knew it. We drove home in silence. My heart was racing the entire time. I kept thinking about George, about how wrong this was, but also about how alive I felt. How in those brief moments I wasn't invisible. I wasn't some forgotten woman fading quietly into the corners of a lonely marriage. Adam didn't stay long the next morning. He avoided eye contact. We exchanged stiff goodbyes, both of us pretending we could erase it by not mentioning it. But the truth hung between us like heavy smoke, visible, choking, undeniable. Since then, every memory of that night comes with a collision of emotion, guilt, shame, but also something else, something that feels dangerously close to longing. I didn't mean for it to happen. I didn't plan to betray my marriage, but vulnerability doesn't always wait for logic. And sometimes the line between needing comfort and seeking affection becomes too blurred to see, until you've already stepped past it.